I'm gonna ask you to start off and just restate what your answer was. Has your race affected your experience at OU? Why or why?
As the only time it has been has been marginal. For instance, sometimes somebody will call me like, "Oh, my Asian" or something like that, and I just try to pull them to the side and say, "No, my name's Kevin. I am Asian, but it doesn't work the other way around." So like as I said before, like um, squares can be rectangles, rectangles aren't squares. Um, so just like saying that, like I identify myself as Kevin Zhang. I am Chinese American. That's a part of it, but that's not everything. So it's just a small thing, and it hasn't caused really any issues. So.
Um, I feel like race has a huge impact on what we do and like how we function in life. Even if we recognize it or not, I think that there are a lot of things that like come along with the race that you are, like white privilege. There are a lot of things that I go through life day to day and don't even consider to impact my life personally, but it does. Like, it's like looked at as like something that I did individually, but yeah,
that does bother me.
yeah, things like that, or like, oh, you were late to class because you're black. Like, if someone was like learning more about that in college and like able to recognize that more, just
like Asian American households are more disciplined. They like do hold academics to a high regard. Like that's just the fact. But like I don't really like it when
And I think you can restart your answer because I think we were at you with the.
Do you want to start over?
Yeah, we can start.
Speak louder.
Yeah, and speak a little louder, please, just so the
Don't be
camera
shy.
can pick up your voice, please. Thank you. So the question is, what is Tiffany? No, the question is, what is the racial makeup of the campus orgs that you were involved in? You can start off.
I'm in the marching 110, and there's actually 238 of us, and of that number, about 10 are black, and two are Asian.
I am in student run theater, Los Domingo Company, and I'd say about 90% are Caucasian and probably a few African American.
In the student organizations that I'm in, most are Caucasian, but I wanted to say that the one like we've like made our own group, and that's really interesting because then I think there's more diversity when it's not, I don't know, maybe labeled under like a certain, like maybe like a label in general. With other organizations, and when you go out of that, it allows for a greater diversity. There's nothing, because you're not signing up for things really. It kind of collects naturally, right?
I'm in an organization called Reactive Film, which interestingly, like everyone on the executive board is African American, and then like everyone else is white.
I'm a member of the football team. White and black are the two dominant races on the team. I want to say they're almost even in numbers, but most of the black people are like defensive players. And then we have one, I want to say Hawaiian, and I apologize to him in advance if this is wrong, but I want to say we have one Samoan.
That's great.
Do you mind if I ask, what's the relationship like on the football team between the two?
Thank you for asking. That's a great question.
I wanted to speak on that earlier when you guys were talking about like natural segregation. It's not like, it really does just happen naturally. Like most of the African American players on the team are on the defensive side of the ball, and most of the white players on the team play offense. But it's the only time you really see them mixed together is like in the locker room. And the locker room is a common area, like your locker goes in order by number. So you'll have offensive and defensive players next to each other, like they'll talk in the locker room. But if you see them outside the locker room, it's like they kind of force it on us to a certain extent, because when you have meetings, like you're with your position group and you have like unit meetings and you're with the whole defense, so you really don't have time to like mesh with each other unless you like in the locker room or out on the field. But even like out on the field, you still see those relationships because the offensive players protect the offense and the defense does the same. So when you get to the highest levels of competition, like fights are inevitable, like it happens, it's part of the game. But at the same time, offense and defense respects itself enough to where that fight happened, let's move on to the next play, we cool right after that.
Do Do you hang out with other teammates, like over the weekend and stuff?
Oh yeah, like if you see us out together, like we'll definitely go out as a team, but it's pretty much like what you would expect. Like you have your certain like white kids that do love the defensive players, like they'll hang with us more than they hang with the offense. And then you have certain defensive players that do the same thing, but you see us all out, like as a team, if we're in the same place, we'll all be together, white and black.
Thanks. And you were about to say something, Tiffany, or you were? Oh, yeah.
I just thought we were going around the circle.
Okay, yeah. You go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I am Greek, I'm a Delta Zeta alum, and when I first joined the Greek system, when I joined my sorority, it was 100% white. I don't think we had any Asian American, any Hispanic, any African American in my sorority, and then as the years went on, we had 3 African American girls join, and I think right now we have 2. So not a lot of diversity in the Greek system, I don't think. And then my first 3 years of college, I was in Air Force ROTC, and I think out of 78 members, we had 5 African American members, and I want to say 1 Asian American member. And then I'm also in an organization called Crew. It's Christian organization, and I think there's a pretty low level of diversity in it. It's definitely predominantly white. I think my best friend is in it too, and she's black, and she always talks about how black people don't want to come because they don't see anybody that looks like them there, and they don't want to get involved because it's like we said earlier, you just like relate to people and gravitate towards people who look similar to you. So I think that in all of the organizations on campus that I've been a part of, the level of diversity kind of mirrors the diversity level of the campus as a whole. Like, because it's predominantly white, there are more white members in each organization.
Well, the 2 main organizations that I'm in right now are the Black Student Union and then FLES, it's Foreign Languages in Elementary Schools. And Black Student Union is predominantly black. We have 3 white members. And then FLES is predominantly white, and there's me and 1 Latina.
Student organizations I'm involved in. I'm in Shea Sales Center, and that is, I think I'm the only other person in different color in that whole thing. Then I'm also part of Crew. I'm in the Shea Sales Center, and it's predominantly white. I think I'm the only one that's of a different race, at least from my knowledge. And I'm also part of Crew, the Christian ministry on campus. And I would agree, like, I think I'm one of 2 Asian kids in that whole thing, but that's just because, like, again, like, it's representative of what OU is. There are not a lot of Asian American kids, but we do have a lot of international students that come around. So we have people straight from China, and we have people from Brazil, and yeah, so those are the 2 main groups, and then we have a few, like, I put them on, like, count them on my hand, like Kyle Walker and Shayla are like 2 ones that I remember. Maybe there's a few other ones, but they're African American, so.
Right, I'm in the National Society of Black Engineers. It's like 40 black people and 1 white person. That's it.
Cool, and my follow-up to that is, and some of you already kind of alluded to this in your answers, but
There's a white guy and a black engineer. Wait, no one else caught that? Like, yeah.
I did, because I was just having this discussion with,
There are white members of the
with my
Black Student
roommate.
Union.
Anyway,
All right.
but some of you guys already alluded to it, but do members of your organizations, do they notice the lack of diversity, and have they tried anything to curtail that, or is it just like, that's how it is, or they may not notice it at all? So, anybody want to share? Or?
Yeah, like, well, I know with the band, I know I said 10, but it's actually 5 of us. I tried to count. And so, I mean,
I got
there-
stopped at 1 hand.
pretty much, but like, so there's probably 8 sections total, and so they definitely notice. They're like, they kind of get excited. The white kids get excited when we have 1 black person, at least 1 black person in every section, and we're getting close again, so they're getting a little excited. But like, yeah, that's that's just pretty much how it is. They don't really notice it outside of that, though.
I feel like, sorry.
Go ahead.
I feel like it's so interesting that you say the white people get excited when there's like one black person that comes, but white people don't do anything to go out of their way to invite more minorities into like organizations.
Yeah.
It's just so weird. Like, oh my gosh, there's a black person in band. Like, then why don't you like talk to more people? Why don't you branch out? There's like, I think you were talking about like the level of uncomfortability earlier and how people just like don't branch out, and it's like something that people desire and get excited about, but then don't do anything to like propel that.
Yeah, I mean, like it's tough to get black kids in band because, I mean, the majority of the high schools that we play for are predominantly white schools, so then the few black kids from their band, if they do decide to come to OU and join, and then they make it, I mean, there's just like such a small chance of that, all those things actually happening. And so it's hard for us to like branch out and try to find actual other multicultural members at all because we really don't have a say. But yeah.
I think I'm similar to like what you were saying earlier, Kevin, that in a way, like, it's not that I maybe like don't care, it's just like I don't see it as much. And like as a result, like I don't really care. Because like it's just not like maybe in the forefront of my mind. Maybe I've just been raised that way. But if it's not in the forefront of my mind, I think it may not be then in the forefront of at least my peers' minds. I'm not so sure. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but that's just I know where I'm at. And I mean it's nice. I think I'm at a place where I don't exactly like look at people and like maybe segregate like according to their skin color or something like that. Because I think when you're at OU, you know, you kind of feel like you're all, at least in one spot, kind of unanimously. And that breeds a certain amount of comfort.
Yeah, and I think like with certain organizations, like they're different. Like for example, for Crew, like our job isn't to recruit like a bunch of people. Like, I mean, we're there to like share what we believe, and whoever wants to come comes. Like, we're not out there recruiting people. So like that's a different take on it. So obviously it's all out of voluntary. People come voluntarily. So typically that's more of a random sample in that sense. And people just kind of like represent what OU looks like. In terms of the sales center, typically the people that are going in there are business college kids and business school. And typically that's just like a white dominated field. That's just what it is. Asian Americans have a really tough time going to like anything that has to do with corporate. But I was fortunately raised with a dad who was a CEO. So like I think that was like where like the difference kind of originated, where I don't really see that as an issue. I personally believe a lot of the issues of race are perceived, not necessarily there. I feel like a lot of people in minority groups use that as an excuse to not do something. But that's just my opinion, just about putting yourself out there. And yeah, like actively recruiting is not really the best way of going about it. It's more of just like hanging out, being like, hey, I'm gonna come alongside you as a friend, and then if it happens that you have this interest, then we'll do that interest as well. But recruiting isn't really the best way.
Well, actually, so I was in the sales center my freshman year and sophomore year when I was going to be a marketing major as well. And they actually do actively recruit black kids. They go to meetings because there aren't very many, and then they'll get them, but then they won't stay in the sales center or like actively participate or like be a part of like leadership roles. So I know they do, and I think I would have to like disagree that, I mean, even for something like Crew where it's like, it's not necessarily, I mean, if you don't want to, I guess, push your beliefs onto someone else, I think actively recruitment, I kind of thought of more in a way of like what Shayla does. I talked to Shayla about this, and she'll like tell people like me, I've been a couple of times. They're like, tell your friends who are black who happen to believe the same things that you believe, like, hey, you should still come too.
Even in that train of logic, you should tell your friends who happen to be black. It's always about telling your friends.
Or people you know, maybe not someone who's close with.
And I think that's the right way of going about it, is like, if it just so happens But in terms of like, oh, I'm gonna be friends with you so I can recruit you for this organization, specifically if it's a spiritual one, that's a bad motivation. And with the sales center, yeah, I mean, they try to recruit everybody. So they go to every single organization they can possibly go to. But like in terms of retaining African Americans, I don't know why that is. And I think it's just, just different goals at the end of the day.
But to speak to my organizations, so BSU, I think sometimes it's easy for people in BSU to get like lost in the black bubble, like because you finally have somewhere that's a black bubble, so you want to stay in your black bubble. But so I think originally no, like there wasn't any initiative to like tell like white people or Asian people or any other race to like come to our meetings. But like one thing that I've tried to like tell people is like you have to like you're still not prepared for the world if you're in an all black bubble, like because the world doesn't look like that. So like I think maybe not so much like actively recruiting, but like letting people know that like if you want to come, you can come. Like when I meet white people or new people, I'm like, you can come, like come, we want to talk about it. Like I talk about BSU all the time. So I think it's more of that. So again, like going to people you know or people you encounter and inviting them to join. And then in FLES, I think it's interesting because it's foreign languages in elementary schools. So that's like French, Spanish, I think somebody taught like Chinese. So going back to Spanish, because that's the language I speak, like a lot of Spanish speakers are not white, but my group is like all white and one Latina person, and she doesn't come all the time. So I like think it's really interesting because I'll go to like Athens elementary schools and I can tell that like I'm the first black person that some of those children have seen, and that's not necessarily their fault, but I think it's very interesting that we don't like actively recruit. And I only heard about it from like this guy I know that's in my college, and he's like, oh, I think you might like this. But like we don't actively recruit people who these might even be their native languages, so they might be better teachers than we are. But we don't actively recruit people of other races, and I think it's really interesting.
I feel like part of the problem is kind of like what you were talking about, the fact that it's not on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And it's like, if you don't feel like race personally affects you or impacts you, then you're not gonna make an effort to like reach out to people who are different from you. And a lot of people kind of assume like the solution is color blindness, which is like I don't see color, I'm not like looking at you as if you're a color, but I feel like the race that we are like explains so much about our culture and our background and our family and where we come from. And I feel like part of it is just like not recognizing that there is a need for diversity, and there, like just like you said, like if we stay in our bubbles, like we're gonna go out into the world and we're not gonna experience, like we're not gonna know how to handle it, and like because we're too fearful of being uncomfortable and reaching out, and or we just like choose not to recognize it, or because we're not thinking about it or not accustomed to it, we're not gonna branch out, and then like our bubbles are gonna continue to stay that way like throughout life. And I think like it has to start like with our organizations now. I think like part of the problem is like allowing it to like not be on the forefront of our mind because like we feel like it's not important.
I have to agree. I think blindness is ignorance. So it's that in a perfect world, the solution would be that, we're each comfortable with each other. It's that we're not blind, but we're so comfortable in a way that it's a full realization, and it would almost look like blindness, but it's not. It's just a level of comfort.
Yeah, I mean, I would say two things. Like one, like children don't see color; they see differences,
Sure.
and that's like what we have to get back to. Also, like the one thing that always gets me, I forget what philosopher said this. I think it was Ravi Zacharias, but he stated that equity of being doesn't necessitate conformity of expression. That when you are of equal value, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to express that in the same way. And it has to get to the point where we're not blind, but rather we see and then we love. And that's like with children, that's exactly like it. They're the best model for that. In the sense that they don't see it, the color, they just see that you're different. Like, for example, like them saying, oh, Valerian's black. Like, all right, that's a true statement. Like, that's just what they take it as, instead of that connotation that, like, oh, you're separating them out or doing this or doing that. Like, assuming all these implied motivations motivations that really shouldn't be there. So, yeah.
My bad. I was just like, I like met like since I've been at OU, I met a lot of international people here too, and a lot of times, well, like people, I think that's like a real like historical thing too, as far as like being in America, because like when like I'll talk to like somebody from international, like like you know like we don't pay attention to like he's black, he's a human being. He's more like he's a human being, versus he's black, he's white, he's Asian. Like I've kind of seen like more with international people, it's like less bias when people are talking to each other, and how we communicate with each other and interact with each other is kind of based on like what our previous knowledge about that race is here in America versus other places.
Yeah, I mean, the American culture, like, perception of different races is really detrimental, because, like, for example, my mom, like, she doesn't trust a lot of African Americans. Like, one of my best friends when I was in elementary school was black, and, like, she would never want him to hang out with us, and I was like, I don't get that. And I still don't get that. Like, to this day, like, there's still, like, a little bit of that. My sister and I are like, you can't be doing this to people. And it's just because, like, when she, like, from China coming to the U.S., she's freaked out, and then people tell her about, like, all these things, and, like, these stereotypes of people, and then she just has this notion that people are like that. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Do you think the racial diversity in America promotes segregation?
I mean, I think it's just a fact. I think the promotion of segregation is against the person. It's on an individual basis, not a corporate one.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So, sorry, what?
No, I said, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I thought you said something else. But yeah, yeah, for example, my mom also thinks that, like, she just inherently doesn't trust people. She's just very cynical. Whereas my dad is the complete opposite. Like, it's funny because, like, I think her first true exposure to, like, the African American community was through one of my dad's really good friends. And we went to, like, a New Year's party where we were the only other race and everyone else was black, and they started line dancing, and then my mom loved that. So, so my mom,
Bringing
yeah.
people together.
She would line dance with them and be like, this is so fun, and like that did change her view on a lot of things. So, like, line dancing, bringing races together since whenever, but like, so like it's just all about that exposure, I guess. So.
Cool. Any other last thoughts? Because that was like my final question. Unless you guys want to add anything else you guys want to add.
Were we talking about organizations?
We already talked about organizations.
I was just really kind of curious because you started mentioning your exchange students, and this is kind of where my question came from about America's diversity. And maybe like you can answer this. It's like when you see these exchange students come in, are they more accepting of race? Are they more, we see, we love, or is it more of that? I mean, perhaps more of a visual segregation.
I think it's kind of like a visual segregation, because like when like international students come here, like let's say, like for the people that I was talking, like they're from Oman, which is right next to Saudi Arabia. Like they'll come to America and they have like they probably won't actively pursue like to like bond with other cultures. They'll like attract, and so they'll go with other Oman people. But if somebody like if I go out my way to approach them and say, hey, how are you doing? My name's Daniel, blah blah blah. They've been open to talking with me. Like I've seen people like from China do that, from Oman do that, from Africa. They're open to talk to you. They're just not. Sometimes they're afraid to talk to you about their culture, something like that. But usually if you talk to them and you're open with them.
When you embarrass them publicly, you would just say, hey dude, like, I don't appreciate that. It's going to be an awkward conversation, yeah, but it's better that you have that instead of, see what happens is that you start festering this assumption that this person is ignorant. Even if you know that he's not, you still fester it. And then it just kind of like spirals and just builds and builds. So you have to like, having the awkward conversation prevents a lot of hurt later on, and it may just be a small thing like that.
Absolutely.
So for instance, you say that and if she was offended, like, I would say it's her responsibility to go up to you and be like, hey, like, I didn't appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And it's just, you still in a loving manner, but in a very graceful manner, and then just say like, yeah, I didn't appreciate that, I would appreciate you didn't talk about that. I mean, it's an awkward conversation, but that's the best way of going about it.
That's the whole thing is like race is always, it may always be taboo.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's always going to be that awkward conversation if you want to have it. And I don't know if you can fix that.
Yeah, and and often that fosters better relationships after.
And that, absolutely, I totally agree.
I think, yeah, just up to both of us, everybody.
Can I just have one?
Hey, we good, yeah, I'm just
Sorry.
letting y'all talk, I'm just chilling.
If
like,
anyone wants to not hear me talk
if
anymore,
you
just
wanna
tell me to
leave,
shut
if you
up.
got somewhere to be.
We were talking about that earlier, like about how if somebody says something wrong, like sometimes people just need to be called out, you know? It's like you don't always know how you're like the effect you're having on other people, and like it's like yeah, you might like feel like an idiot, but you're not gonna look like an idiot in the future because you're gonna know better. And like instead of living in the fear of saying something wrong, like you have the knowledge and you've been informed, so you can live in freedom and like coexist with other people.
It's also a little bit of swallowing your pride. and just
Right?
being like,
Yeah.
No, there's no way I was
Yeah.
wrong. That's not offensive. They shouldn't think that's offensive.
So
It's like, well, who
humbling.
are you to say that? Like, who are you to determine someone's preference? Because for me, like someone calling someone else Asian, they might not worry about that, but for me, that's just something I don't like. So.
Branching off of what you said, there's this girl in my RA class, and she gets thought of as she's African American or black a lot, and actually she's Haitian, and she really takes offense to that. And you guys might actually know her, Natalie. Is that what you're talking about? I thought.
No.
Okay, I
I
thought
was
you was like.
telling the Dominican guy black, he was like,
Oh yeah, see that's
okay,
exactly.
sorry about
She
that.
gets so like upset about it because that's not who she is. But she does the same thing as you. She like pulls them aside and lets them know.
I mean, you mentioned like individual, you have to move to the individual level.
Yeah.
That'd be the only way.
Yeah. And it's hard for me as an econ major because I just tend to think of everyone as the same. You know, they're all rational beings for some. They're all social experiments in my mind.
Hey, you're free to go whenever, I'm just, yeah.
Cool.
Appreciate everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was so good talking to you.
Thank you.
Tiffany.
Nice meeting you.
James, yeah. We got to it.